I want to learn on my level. I just want to be challenged.
Make me think.
Welcome to our presentation, Gifted Students Are Gifted All Day Long, not just when they're in GT class. We are so excited to share with you about the ways in which we strive to meet the needs of our students school-wide throughout the day. Your presenters include Jane Keene and Carol Honeycutt, both GT teachers at McNair Middle School in Fayetteville, Arkansas, as well as Lisa Davis, the principal at McNair Middle School. We will have a few student and teacher interviews as well. Thank you for joining us. The definition of enrichment is making something more meaningful, substantial, rewarding, or valuable. Enrichment is so much more than just extra activities or extra work. To make something more valuable, it has to be more meaningful. It should be work that students find rewarding. Enrichment can come in several forms. You can enrich one single topic or lesson by allowing students time to explore in more depth or by making problems more complex. Enrichment can be something students have access to if they finish their work early. Enrichment can come in several forms. You can enrich one single topic or lesson by allowing students time to explore in more depth or by making problems more complex. Enrichment can be something students have access to if they finish their regular work early. This is often the most common use in the general classroom, and it's important that this work be viewed as meaningful and not just extra work. Enrichment should not be a punishment, and let's face it, extra work often seems more like punishment than something valuable. Sometimes enrichment needs to go a step further. When students demonstrate mastery over an entire unit of material, is it valuable for them to work through that material again? How much more meaningful would it be to let students go beyond and experience the next level of learning, whether that's working ahead or just diving more deeply? Why do we feel enrichment is so important? Bottom line, we want students to grow. In order to grow their brain muscles bigger and stronger, we have to keep feeding them. At McNair Middle School, we have a gifted and talented pull-out program for students who have been identified as needing gifted services. This class meets for 150 minutes once a week. Students are presented with curriculum units that are different from other middle school classes and are often specialized topics that aren't covered in the general education setting until junior high or high school. Students also have a great deal of choice as to how they demonstrate learning. We also have several individual teachers who strive to implement enrichment and differentiation within their own classrooms. These teachers offer extensions that are valuable and meaningful, not only to our identified students, but to any student who demonstrates a need for that something extra. Even though our school does a great job meeting the needs of students, we recognize that we can always do better. We are striving to implement a model of school-wide enrichment, something that will make it easy for all teachers to offer enrichment to any student who needs it. Even though our school does a great job meeting the needs of students, we recognize that we can always do better. We are striving to implement a model of school-wide enrichment, something that will make it easy for all teachers to offer enrichment to any student who needs it. McNair Middle School opened in the fall of 2000. Our school is home to almost 700 students and 100 plus staff members. Nearly 20% of our students receive gifted services. In addition, we welcome a large number of students who are proficient or advanced in English language arts and math who, while not specifically identified as gifted, are in need of enrichment opportunities within the regular classroom. We decided to collaborate with coworkers to determine what we could do to meet the needs of our advanced learners who were demonstrating a need for extra challenges in the regular classroom. The first step was to research. We read Collaboration, Co-Teaching, and Coaching in Gifted Education by Emily Mofield and Vicki Phelps, who gave us some great ideas to bring to our PLC meetings. One key takeaway from this book was that we couldn't achieve our goals by working alone. Working together, we brainstormed potential solutions, collecting great ideas from our top-notch educators.
One way that we've worked to meet the needs of students this year is through curriculum compacting. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. Curriculum compacting is a technique for differentiating instruction that allows teachers to make adjustments to curriculum for students who have already mastered the material to be learned, replacing content students know with new content, enrichment options, or other activities. Researchers recommend that teachers first determine the expected goals of the unit or lesson in terms of the content, skills, or standards students must learn before assessing students, to determine which ones have already mastered most or all of the specific learning outcomes. The first step in the compacting process is choosing curricular content and learning objectives. What do you want to make sure that the students will learn? To assist in the task, you may consider the following criteria. To what extent do these objectives represent new learning? Which objectives will best help students increase their use of this content area? Which objectives can be applied to the workplace? Which objectives deal with developing skills or concepts as opposed to merely memorizing facts? Which objectives are important for high ability students to understand? Which objectives cannot be learned without formal or sustained instruction? Which objectives reflect the priorities of the school district or State Department of Education? After the objectives are selected, they should be listed by priority. Because of their importance, the higher ranked items are the ones teachers will concentrate on with the entire class, while the less relevant ones are prime candidates for compacting. The next step is to find an appropriate way to pretest the learning objectives. Pretesting, as its name implies, is intended to measure students' skills and talents before instruction begins. It should provide teachers with precise information on objectives already met, objectives not yet met, and any problems that may prevent students from progressing with the objectives. You can consider objective reference tests and performance-based assessments. Ideally, a pretest should demonstrate whether a student has full, partial, or little mastery of an objective. Objective or criterion reference tests can do that effectively, as they usually assess one objective at a time through short answers or multiple choice responses. On a practical level, these paper and pencil tests appeal to teachers because they can be administered in large group settings, require little time to oversee or correct, and are readily available from textbook publishers or testing companies, allowing teachers to keep records of student progress. Performance-based assessment is a popular alternative to objective reference tests. By asking students to do oral, written, or manipulative work in front of them, teachers can observe and evaluate the process students use to arrive at an answer. This procedure is especially successful with younger children who are not yet ready for paper and pencil tests. Students may be evaluated individually or in small groups through conferences, interviews, or portfolios of completed work. As with objective reference tests, this requires pre-planning. Teachers must take the time to locate or create the performance tests, making sure that they're aligned with the desired learning objectives. After deciding what kinds of pretest to use, you're going to want to identify students who should take the pretest. Do you want to give the pretest to every student, or do you only want to discern the strengths of certain students? You may want to look at things like academic records, standardized tests, and class performance to help identify students who may need compacting. Then you pretest. Pretests, both formal and informal, help teachers determine student mastery of course material. But what constitutes mastery? Since definitions of mastery vary, teachers within the same school should strive to reach a consensus. After administering the pretest, you should get an idea of which students need to go through the traditional form of learning and which students can be streamlined. Streamlined practice or instructional time for students who show mastery of the objectives through skill and content compacting. Students who have a thorough grasp of the learning objectives should be allowed to take part in enrichment or acceleration activities. This exposes them during class time to material that's not only new and stimulating, but more closely aligned to their learning rates and abilities. Alternatives often exist to provide acceleration and/or enrichment for students whose curriculum has been compacted. The possibilities for replacement activities can be seen on the screen. Teachers will have to decide which replacement activities to use, and their decisions will be based on factors such as time, space, resources, school policy, and help from other faculty. While practical concerns should be considered, what should ultimately determine replacement activities are the degree of academic challenge and student interest. I get it, this is a lot to take in. I mean, what does this even look like? Where do we even begin? Let's look at some examples and some teachers who are doing this the right way, and maybe we can decide how we want to do it.
Why do you give pretests in your class?
So before every unit, I give a pretest, and we use that pretest for students to figure out where they are at on each of the standards. And we also goal set before every unit, and we set a goal of what we'd like our reward to be as a class. And if they meet it as a class, we celebrate that reward. For myself, I use those pretests to determine where are my next steps for my students.
How do you structure and implement these pretests?
So whenever I am thinking about my pretest, I think about what I want to be on my post-test. Oftentimes I'm using the same assessment because that's the easiest way to make sure that the same standards have been met and that I am measuring what I wanted to at the beginning of the unit and the end of the unit. I then implement them.
How does the data you collect from these pretests guide your instruction?
Okay, so I use these pretests, and I created something called the ACT performance level descriptors spreadsheet, and on that spreadsheet I looked at the ACT gives you all the standards and whether or not that would be a ready standard or whether that would be in need of support or close or exceeding. So I went to for sixth grade level, and I put all of that into a spreadsheet, and then I looked at the prior knowledge of kids, what would be a fifth grade standard or a fourth grade standard, and I built in introductory skills for my kids who aren't quite ready for the sixth grade content using that ACT level performance descriptors. And then I also looked at the 8th and 9th grade, 7th, 8th, and 9th grade skills and built to the bottom exceeding skills for kids who have already mastered the content. So I use my pretest to determine where I need to put kids in on that spreadsheet. And then I also have them self-grade themselves in each of those goals, whether or not they feel like they can do it. And then on the spreadsheet, they are linked to lessons from Khan Academy and Learn Gazillion that they can get independent practice and help and feedback on those skills that they need to be targeting themselves.
What do you do with students who demonstrate that they know the content? How do you push them farther?
Okay, so kids who are above grade level or have already mastered the pretest, like a couple of kids here, I will encourage them first to go through and look at the spreadsheet and make sure they do feel like they can do all of those essential skills that the ACT would recommend. When they plug in their answers on the spreadsheet, it will turn them either red, yellow, blue, or green based off of what type of score they self-score themselves. And then I encourage them to go back and look at any of the things that are yellow or red first, because they know that those are the skills they're not certain that they're doing well on. And then from that, they start looking at those lessons themselves. And then it allows them an entry point anywhere from 6th grade down to 4th grade up to 7th or 8th grade, and they get those lessons. So at the end of the 6th grade skills, I have projects that I've put in there that they get to choose from. So if they feel like they have mastered everything and they show that they've mastered it on the test, they can then begin projects that are related to the content, or they can begin looking at skills to enrich themselves that are 7th and 8th grade skills.
I've been really excited to be able to work with the PLCs here at McNair Middle School this year. I've been able to meet with a lot of different groups and see all the awesome stuff happening. And one of the greatest things that I've seen this year is something that was happening in 6th grade math. They had created this spreadsheet where they put all of the different standards from the ACT performance level descriptors. And what they had done was they had linked them to different tutorials and allowed for students to offer feedback on where they thought they stood with these different objectives and standards. So you can find the ACT Aspire performance level descriptor standards online. And I took the 5th grade standards and put them into this spreadsheet for teachers to be able to use. And we're looking at the main topics of operations and algebraic thinking, numbers and operations base 10, numbers and operations fractions, just different things like that. So all of these are the different standards that the ACT provides for teachers to help guide their teaching. And there's the intro standards should be things they should be able to do when they go into it. Applying knowledge is, they're starting to get there. The mastering the knowledge is where they're able to master the standards that they want them to master. And then exceeding would be the things that the students would be able to do if they were learning in a more advanced way. And all of these standards are linked to tutorials from Learn Zillion and Khan Academy. And so there are tons and tons and tons of tutorials available on those sites. And students are able, if they feel like they maybe just want a refresher, to go in and watch these videos. Now, this is not meant to be a replacement for teaching. It's just a way for students to kind of advance their learning a little bit. If students are able to demonstrate at least an 80% mastery in the classroom over these different standards, then they're able to move on with their learning to some different enrichment topics. So the 6th grade enrichment topics are the numbers and operations based 10 standards for 6th grade. 7th grade enrichment topics, same thing. So students can extend their learning and go deeper and more complex in what they know. They're also able to participate in some base 10 enrichment projects, such as the cost of Super Bowl ads in scientific notation, digital escape rooms, and a great article from Birdseed TV about what if there were no hundreds place. And then there's also some options of games that students can play. And the same thing kind of carries over for each of the main topics. So you have, of course, for fractions, these different standards that we're wanting students to meet. And then we have the 6th grade enrichment topics. We have the 7th grade enrichment topics. There's some different extensions and projects such as Mardi Gras and beads for them to be able to do. And then there's some games below. So each of these kind of follows that pattern, and it allows students to go in and see what they'll be learning, to be able to rate where they believe they are in their learning, which is a super cool way for students to own their learning. And then also they're able to learn more about those different topics, and it provides them with an option for extension within the content area. I really appreciate Courtney Burkett for sharing this information with me and for allowing me to build on it. Before we move on, I want you to think about the standards which you teach. Are there any which you feel may be prime candidates for compacting? Maybe there's something that you seem to notice a large number of students have mastery over every year with little instruction. Or something you feel can be learned without formal or sustained instruction. Make a mental note of these now, and after we talk about potential enrichment ideas, consider making a pretest for some of these standards. There are a number of ways that you can reach your students where they are and offer them enrichment. Today, we're going to expand on using choiceboard and independent study as enrichment options. We all know that the one-size-fits-all approach just doesn't work. That's why we've looked to choice boards to reach a wide variety of learners. A choice board is a graphic organizer that allows students to choose different ways to learn about concepts. Using a choice board for enrichment looks a little different than what you might see in the regular classroom. Generally, a choice board is designed to facilitate learning of a certain objective or standard. An enrichment choice board is designed to help students think in more deep and complex ways about the content in general. It provides students with many different ways to learn about the subject once they've mastered the basics. On the slideshow that's included with the presentation, you can see what some of our enrichment choice boards look like by clicking on them.
The idea of a choice board seemed to be the best first approach to offering enrichment to all students in the general classroom. We knew we needed to focus on something for each core subject area, so we created a choice board for English language arts, math, science, and social studies. We went to the PLC meetings for each of those core areas and asked teachers for topics and standards that would be good choices for enrichment. Then we set to work to find activities that would address those areas. We also looked for enriching activities that were specific to a core subject but covered broader topics. We first began searching for various websites and digital resources that offered free lessons and activities. We also subscribed to a few resources that offered fabulous extensions for all core subject areas. Then we began plugging in our favorite activities and lessons into a choice board. Let's take a look at the English Language Arts choice board. We selected a number of lessons from Birdseed TV. This website does require a subscription, but you certainly get a lot of bang for your buck as it includes lessons for all subject areas as well as practice in creativity and critical thinking. Let's dive into a Birdseed example so you can see what's available. I've selected the lesson on creating analogies. Each Birdseed lesson comes with a series of videos and then provides an enriching activity. Objectives are clearly stated so that students know what they should be doing. There are often links to worksheets or graphic organizers. If these are needed, we include a link on the choice board itself so that the students have access to a digital copy.
In this video, your students are going to investigate analogies, and we'll begin by just introducing the idea of an analogy with a couple simple examples. I'll explain the common shorthand using these colons, and at the end of the student's first video, they'll complete 3 analogies. Then they come back, get the answers, and they'll start to develop their own creative analogies based on 2 seemingly unrelated content areas. In my sample, I'll be using volcanoes and the human body, 2 topics that maybe don't seem that related. Feel free to assign 2 ideas to your students, maybe give students options, or let them pick from their favorite topics they've learned about this year. The less obviously related, the better. Students will now brainstorm as much vocabulary as they can think of about each of the 2 topics. Here I've created 2 circle maps, packed with volcano and human body vocabulary. Once I have a bunch of these ideas down, then I start to look for parallels. The first one that I notice is that magma is sort of like blood. It's warm, it flows below the surface, and lava might also be related. And since magma flows through conduits and blood flows through veins, I could note that these are another parallel. And the volcano's outer layer is its crust, whereas humans are covered in skin, and maybe the hot spot is related to the heart. So despite how different these 2 topics are, I can see these parallels. I have a whole bunch of connections now, and I can turn those connections into analogies. Here are a few ideas that I came up with. Vein is to blood as conduit is to magma, or crust is to volcano as skin is to the human body. A hotspot is to magma as heart is to blood. Now we take a break here, and students are going to brainstorm the vocabulary from their 2 ideas. Then they're going to look for parallels and come up with 3 to 5 of these analogies related to their 2 topics. Then, in the next video, students are going to build out their explanations for the analogies that they came up with. And I've set up this graphic organizer. Students begin by writing in the 2 related vocabulary words, veins and conduits in my case. Then, they define the terms. No need to worry about how they are connected at this point. We just want a good definition. And finally, in the last column, here's where we explain the connection. In this case, both conduits and veins are tubes that transport a warm liquid under the surface. Students will now fill out their own versions of this worksheet. And finally, it's time to think about the final product. What will students make beyond this worksheet? I'm going to create a situation where the 2 seemingly unrelated ideas actually meet each other and realize how much they really have in common. I wrote out a sample script here between the volcano and the human body, building on the analogies that I created earlier. Then the script can turn into a comic, or grow into a short story, or be acted out as a skit. In the end, students will have explored the idea of connecting 2 ideas that seem unrelated, developing parallels and analogies, and then explaining those connections through a creative product. Have fun!
Another type of activity we've used with all core subject area choice boards is a digital breakout, which is essentially a digital version of an escape room. We have a subscription to Breakout EDU so that we have full access to everything that the site offers. However, there are a number of free breakouts available on the site as well. There are also other breakout games that are individually produced and can be fairly easily found by searching Google or Pinterest. Breakout EDU provides a background story for each digital breakout. In this example, it's a story based on Little Red Riding Hood. The ELA learning objective in this example is the elements of plot. Students will click on the different images on the website, such as the diary, study the information given, and decipher the clues necessary to unlock specific locks. Some of the locks use numbers, some use letters, some use colors, and some use directions. Once students think they've figured out each lock, they can enter their guesses into a Google form, submit it, and find out if they're correct. We wanted the choice boards to be easy to manage and something that wouldn't add to the workload of the general education teacher. We set up a school-wide enrichment classroom in Google Classroom. We provided the teachers with the code to give to students that needed this extra challenge. We gave teachers the option to join Google Classroom as a teacher and monitor their own students' work, or to just allow us to monitor work as it comes in.
The
McNair Enrichment Classroom has helped me because sometimes I have some extra time to do more challenging things that I don't get in the classroom, and the enrichment has helped.
A final method of enrichment that we would like to implement at McNair is that of an independent study or passion project. Our idea is to offer this option during the fourth and final quarter of the school year. When students are offered an opportunity to work on enrichment activities, they would be allowed to choose what they would like to learn. Imagine, instead of being told, "This is what we're learning today," you get to choose for yourself. This offers both meaning and reward to the middle school student. We attended our state GT conference this spring and learned how a teacher in another district is using the independent study in her GT classes. We have adapted this idea to use for our school-wide model. The theme is Mission Possible. All necessary documents can be loaded into Google Classroom so that students can work at their own pace. Students would be required to complete all of the steps in their mission and demonstrate that they've met their mission goals and have learned about their topic of choice. Once students have watched the video introduction, they will begin brainstorming topics they'd like to learn about. Once they choose a topic, students will use this template to set their learning goals. They must have a goal that is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. Students will then create a plan to use while completing their independent study. This plan should work to keep students on track. Research should be an early part of the plan with a product or presentation wrapping up their learning experience. Once students have completed the goal of their independent study, they will complete a mission report. This is the perfect opportunity for self-reflection, processing feedback from a teacher or peer, and asking questions that might lead to continued topic exploration.
Can you think of a unit which you could create a choice board for, or some objectives you would like to compact? We've created a list of resources to get you started, but if we've learned anything as educators, it is that it takes a village. In order to earn your full hour of PD, we will be collaborating and piggybacking off one another to create our own choice boards and pretests. If you look at the top of our resource page, you'll notice that there's a link that you can click on. That link will take you to a collaborative page where we can all add our favorite resources to one document and share them. We would like for you to share at least one resource that you think would be good for making a choice board or doing some sort of enrichment activity with. Then, if you scroll down on that same document, you'll see a place where you can link your choice boards or pretests that you create in response to this PD. To create a choice board, think about all of the fun learning experiences you never have time for when you're teaching a certain unit. Which ones could you add as extensions? Challenge yourself to create a 9-box choice board using those items and maybe a few others from our resource page. To create a pretest for compacting, choose which unit you would like to start with and then look at the objectives for that unit. Prioritize them and think about compacting the ones which would be easiest to compact and least valuable to students. Decide if you'll do formal pretest or performance-based assessments. Then create your pretest and share it with us on our collaborative document. We are excited to see what you come up with to help meet the needs of your students next year.